You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Jason Aston.
Hey, how's it going?
So, Jason, tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
Well, professionally, I'm technically an IT guy, although I do lots of things in that role, as most people do. I find everybody wears multiple hats these days. But
With IT, though, hold on. Are we talking about like fixing my network? Because if you do fix my internet when it goes down, I really give you a lot of credit with all the stupid people you have to deal with on a daily basis.
well, luckily, I'm not front end, so I don't deal with the end users. I manage basically people that work on that stuff, and I make sure that they have the right systems access and that they have the tools they need to do that job. So I kind of audit security stuff and make sure that everything's in order and that people are ready to go out and help you guys when you have those issues.
Do you find that a lot of people aren't ready some days? Because I always wanted to look up the statistical fact of how many of those IT on phone specialists actually go to the top of their building and just look off and go, I can fucking jump. Right.
Well, in my case, I use we techs in the field. They actually go out to the premise location. So, I mean, typically, almost anywhere you go, there's always trying to balance the high skilled people that can fix the job or fix the problems with the lowest cost possible solutions in order to keep costs down. So, I think those two things always rub up against each other.
Now,
So,
they do a lot of server maintenance a lot. I'm always wondering, is that actual maintenance or do they just shut it down just to show you that they control a lot of your power?
uh, you know. So specifically, what I do deals with a specific networks, which is security, like basically security aligned stuff like home security. So the stuff that we have doesn't go down because it really can't go down um, because people's home security systems are dependent upon it. So I'm not really the person to talk to about that particular aspect of it, but I mean, I would imagine that, just like a server, just like anything, like your home computer has to be defragged and updated occasionally as well. So
I just kind of want to get your opinion on it because I was always wondering why they always tell us that our internet's going to be down at a certain time. And it's always the hours from right when you get home to like when you're just going to bed. So it's like, you're telling me I can't watch TV? It's like, yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I'm like, why?
well, I think it's funny, as I think that deals with something larger, right? A larger social issue that we have, which is that we always expect the end consumer to bear the brunt of almost anything. So those are after hours. Those are after business hours, right? So business customers tend to spend more money on their services. So with the internet or the power grid or anything else, they always want, the end user, the regular consumer to take the brunt of any cutbacks or any problems instead of burdening the business side, right? It's the same thing as when they're trying to get, the end consumer to cut significantly on their carbon footprints, whereas the actual um, industrial carbon emissions are like 60 to 70% of the problem, but they
Yeah.
almost never go after them directly, right?
I think people are the problem when it comes to pollution.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm saying like which people they're trying to get to really deal with it, right? Like I'm absolutely against pollution. I mean, like we don't want to, like it's not, it doesn't even really matter what you believe about, you know, climate science and all that stuff. At the end of the day, is more pollution better or is less pollution better? It's a very simple question.
What are we talking about? People don't do any damage. Cows are the problem. That's why. We'll
well,
fix me that
well,
way.
as the cow never existed prior to us, I'm pretty sure that we led to that problem too.
I see. It's funny because, like, if you look at, like, all right, let's talk about home security. Do you see that the rise in home security has kind of increased since we're becoming a little bit more technologically, I guess, comfortable? It seems like everybody wants a camera installed. I mean, I remember not too long ago, I think a couple of years ago, there was a point where everyone was taking white out or taking tape and they were putting it on their computer camera because they didn't want to feel like they were going to be watched by some perpetrator online.
Sure. Well, and that's still a real concern, right? I mean, you get kids like baby monitors and stuff that are hacked all the time, and people talking to people's babies. Overall,
Whoa,
I think
whoa, 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 whoa! Don't gloss over. That's new information to me. People are talking to other people's babies. That's
no,
happened.
it's happened many times. Yeah, a lot of Wi-Fi based like baby monitors and things can be hacked. And so we've had parents that walk into their baby's room to find their child talking to a stranger over their thing. And so far, nothing horrifically nefarious, right, has occurred as a result. It's just been, a terrifying thing to have happen. I don't know that the person can necessarily locate the baby per se or know where they are, although they probably can at this point. But, in this case, it's not like somebody actually trying to victimize somebody. I think it's just hackers out trying to have fun and figure their way into different things.
Okay, so at one point in my life, I decided to listen to George Takei's audio tapes that you can listen to at night. And it's very uncomfortable, though I would not recommend listening to. I don't know if you know who George Takei is.
I don't off the top of my head.
The guy that goes, "Oh my."
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so imagine him hacking your baby monitor. So while you just like he's talking to your baby the whole night, like
Yeah. You know what, though? That actually would, him talking to my baby all night would be relatively comforting. I think he's a pretty wholesome individual overall.
I just feel like your kid would adapt the accent. Like your kid would start
That's
like
certainly possible.
would drop something and be like, "Oh my!" And you're like, "Where did that come from?"
Yeah, no, well, for sure. I mean, there's always, there's all kinds of, there's myriad concerns. And it's so funny to me because you hear these concerns coming up all the time. I have in my home several, Amazon devices that listen when you say their name and stuff. And people are so freaked out by that. But what's funny is that everybody is paying $100 for those devices and worried about them listening, but everybody's got $1,000 computer in their pocket that they carry with them everywhere that has microphones and cameras on them,
Yeah,
and they have no problem with that.
I'll never forget. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast when he was talking to Joey Diaz on Christmas Eve, and it was Christmas Day, and I had these AirPods in my ears while I was listening, and they were talking about the fact that now the AirPods can actually record what you're saying, just like a Google Home or just like an Alexa can. And I was like, wait a minute. So all the times I'm at the gym with these AirPods in my ears, or anytime I use a cell phone call, these things are recording what I'm saying, and it made me look at them a little bit different, but I still put them in my ears anyway.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
people love convenience. They don't really care about security that much. Ultimately, I mean,
it all was on the basis of what that one terroristic act that got passed after 9/11. It was a bigger kind of closer eye of government security to make sure to monitor that things really couldn't happen. When that happened, I forgot what the federal act was actually called, but I know
the Patriot Act right after 9/11.
Yeah, there was an act that got immediately passed afterwards, which was
Oh yeah, that was the Patriot Act.
Yeah, that was
probably the least patriotic thing that's ever happened in this country.
Yeah, it really was daddy watching you a little bit closer. It seemed like they were monitoring a lot of people that probably shouldn't be monitored over certain things. I mean, we come to a technological age now. Like everybody's relying on some type of device. We don't know what it would be, especially ages being born now. Like let's say your kids or kids coming up at another generation, they don't know what it was going to be like to not have a cell phone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I'm older than you. I'm 40. You mentioned earlier that you're 21.
Yeah.
Right. So, I remember a time before cell phones were a thing. And it's funny because sometimes you tell kids stories about, different things that were frustrating to you when you were younger. And most of them kind of question like, well, why didn't you just call them? Back when I was coming up, 16, 17, there was cell phones were just beginning to be a thing.
You wrote something on a rock and you chucked it through some motherfucker's window.
You hoped you knew where they were. You hoped they were at work or someplace where you knew the phone number, because if not, if they were running errands or something, you were just screwed. You just had to wait till you could get in touch with them.
I remember before Uber when I used to bike everywhere. Now my cousin's like, I'm going to Uber to my friend's house. I'm like, what? Like, where's your bike? Get your bike out and start pedaling your ass down the street.
Yeah. Well, the same thing for me. Like I've always lived close to to like a corner market or something almost everywhere I've ever lived. And all the time, it's 2 blocks away. So I always walk, and people are like, why don't you drive? You have a car. It's nice to just get out and walk sometimes, guys.
I think we're coming a little bit lazy with our devices, but like just for talking about with the people hacking into people's cameras and then we go on to baby monitors. I think it's really weird because at a time where it seemed like everyone was very, very afraid of the government and people just randomly spying on them, whether they were hacking into certain devices and certain things. Now we're at the point where everyone is buying an Alexa or Amazon package to put in their house to get security cameras in there. I mean, now everyone has their own home security system. They're talking about wanting to feel more comfortable now that they have eyes, they're able to see everything. But, like that kind of goes in the same aspect. What happens if someone decides to hack you got an Amazon warehouse deal of a $40 camera? Well, someone's now going to watch you through your house, but you paid to have that in there.
Yeah, and there's always those concerns. I think for the most part, they're relatively secure, and they try to close those gaps whenever they can. It's interesting. I mean, because again, that's kind of like the area that I work in. Again, most people, I think about this from the perspective of just, I don't really care. Like, I've got nothing to hide, so to speak. So I don't care if anyone wants to pry. Like, no one's going to see anything that I care about, which is of course not true, because everyone, has things that they would prefer, weren't just publicly available, or they
I
wouldn't live
walk
in.
around naked when
Yeah.
nobody's at my house. So if anybody's getting a glimpse of that and you're making a porn off of it, please just give me credit. I don't care. Call me, I don't know,
But,
something funny.
I do think, like, it's funny because a lot of people nowadays, they want cameras in their house to keep an eye on their dog during the day, or like, it's not even necessarily a security thing, really. It's just like, some people do it because they have kids and they want to be able, like, they got a latchkey kid coming home at 14 years old and they want to be able to peek in and make sure that they came to the door alone, or, whatever. And you just want to be able to peek into your living room and make sure everything's fine.
Yeah, my
Um,
buddy got me with that the other day because I don't like going to his house that much anymore, only on the concept of he has his house Amazon Alexa up like a freaking spaceship. I'm a little bit more where I have to get up and turn the light switch off. He's the type of guy that just pulls out his phone and lowers it down or does something like that.
sure.
But he has Alexa. He bought me a Google Home like 4 years ago when that was a hot thing, and I never even opened it out of the box. I ended up giving it to my cousin. So if you're listening, I'm sorry, buddy, but that was a terrible Christmas present. But it scared me because there were so many things I was seeing him get lazy with. Like the fridge was now controlled by Alexa. Now microwaves are being controlled by Alexa. Sooner, like the toilet being controlled by Alexa by having some type of electronic sound, like as like a little light bar that goes above that can also control the lights. You can have that hooked on, so like Alexa can actually control like some of your plumbing in your house. I didn't know
Yeah.
about that, but like I walked up to his doorstep and Alexa greeted me at the door before I could even have a chance to knock. And I mean, I went into his house, thinking like I already knew his passcode to his house. He gave it to me, and I'm not going to do anything crazy. But I just go in there and I open up the fridge and grab like some cereal or grab something.
Sure.
He keeps his fridge in this or his cereal in the fridge. It's a little bit weird, but
Yeah, people do that all kinds of weird. Like, my wife stores her coffee in the freezer. Um,
why?
well, so in my wife's case, she works for a distributor, so we have like hundreds of pounds of coffee in our house at any given time. So honestly, we'll never get around to using it in any reasonable time frame. And I guess it's the idea of preserving some degree of freshness in beans that we know we're not going to grind and use for maybe a year or more. But yeah, there's always those weird things where people do that. When it comes to the Alexa thing, I think I would tell you, like, probably we're fighting a losing battle there, and people don't need to worry. I have seen some really interesting tech teardowns of those, where basically they show, like, literally they've gone through IP packet information to see how much data is being sent, and the processors on the Alexas just aren't strong enough to allow them to process things locally in any meaningful way. So what should be really scary to everybody, more than the Alexa in your house, or even the one in your pocket when you carry your phone around, which has, of course, has a much better processor than the Alexa and a much better microphone and camera capabilities and all those things. What should really be scaring you is the ability that all these companies have when you see these people talk about how they talked about one thing and then a day later they saw an ad for it. It's really not most likely that anyone's been listening in. It's literally that there are algorithms that are just so good at figuring out the thing where you're going and everything that you're looking at online. They know who you're close to, who you're talking to. In some cases, they know that you've been talking. You commented on a thread where a friend mentioned that they bought a product, et cetera. and they're tracking all of that so tightly that they can literally predict these things, and they have long memories. Like,
Do you think this is like a thing? Like, it's not even really the government, really. It's more of an advertising market now. It seems like the best thing to advertise, like you're looking up something on your phone. Next thing you know, you're getting an advertisement for that exact thing that you're looking up.
yeah,
Like I'll be on my Instagram and I'll see a bunch of stuff that I was looking up on Amazon earlier, and I'm like, wow, it's targeting me specifically now.
sure. Well, yeah, I mean, that's I think that is a big part of it, right? I mean, the things that we have to be afraid of are not necessarily the government, right? I think at this point we almost have a point, or we've almost reached a point where large corporations are essentially a shadow government. I mean, they're paying huge amounts of money to write legislation and have people advocate for them. It's interesting to see. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but I think we have to recognize like the huge power of corporations, and one of the ways that they've accomplished that power is through basically generating mass data and learning how to utilize it. And I think that without a huge amount of incentive to do so in the terms of like the profit that they can generate as a result of a successful algorithm, that probably wouldn't have happened. When you talk about the Patriot Act, we talk about terrorism and some of these things, right? I think that one of the things that's scary about that is the idea that used to, the government surveilling everything was actually a terrible idea, because you don't find a needle in a haystack by building a much bigger haystack, right? Like the more things that you're taking in, the more signal noise, then the less you can find, the signal within the
Yeah.
noise, right? So, but now like they're getting so much better, largely because of companies like Google and Amazon. They're getting so much better at, mass data science, and, figuring out how to find that signal in massive amounts of noise. And, that can be used for good. It can be used to stop things, but we see all the time, right, that, that bad things still are happening, even things that where people had jumped online and said, I'm going to do something horrible, and horrible things happen and weren't stopped, even when they explicitly said, I'm going to go do this thing. And, it's within days, but you'd think if there's something out there that's monitoring everything, that they would be able to stop those things. And the fact that they can't stop those things, I think, is indicative of the fact that there is no degree of civil rights that we can give up that will guarantee our safety, right? Apart from just locking ourselves in a jail cell somewhere.
Well, as much as we want to feel like we're safe somewhere, we're actually never safe. Like you can be in your
Yeah,
house and the roof can choose to collapse.
sure. Yeah.
There's obviously these things, but we want to be aware as people. That's why news is so popular, and that's why it really sucks that the news plays a lot of bad stuff all the time. But it's honestly just making you more aware. Like if it sat down and actually played good stuff for you to actually watch, you would only handle so much of it until you were looking for something bad out in like the news, or looking for something bad out in an article, only because you want to be aware as a person. You want to know about your surroundings that are going on. And I think that's why a lot of people nowadays are starting to get, it's because we are going very fast with technology. I don't like it that much. I mean, I broke my phone for I think 2 weeks straight. I did not have one. And I realized every morning I was checking for a phone, like checking the time, checking whatever, a notification. And I realized there's nothing there. So I actually, once I got one back, I actually am rarely on it that much anymore, mostly to set up a podcast. Like I love the communication and the aspect that me and you can talk, but there is a limit to it. We use it way too much in our daily lives. At least a lot of people do, maybe not you and me specifically, but there are people out there that, like in a grocery store, that is a scenario. I leave my phone in the car because I know that trip can turn a hell of a lot longer if you have your phone on you. You end up impeding onto moments in your life. Like you don't want to get nostalgia off your phone. You want to get nostalgia off memories with your family, but you can't, kids nowadays can't consume that nostalgia from having it with their family or memories with their family because they're too captivated by their devices. Where now you even see parents and older generations now becoming more advanced, and they're going into, like, my grandmom knows how to poke on Facebook with a tablet. I never thought I would see that day. I don't even know what that is, a poke or whatever. And she's poking me on Facebook. I'm like, stop. What are you doing? She's like, answer, answer. I'm like, well, so grandma, like, no, this is not the way that I know you as before. And we live in, like I said, a captivating world. There's so much advances going on. I feel like at one point we're going to turn into like how Wally is, where everyone's so reliant on their devices to be so kind of captivated to the point where everybody's 900 pounds and laying on a floating bed that's doing literally everything for us.
Sure. Well, at your age, I'm surprised you're on Facebook, frankly. You know, I hear you. So we have a lot of problems, right? You talked about news and people wanting to be um, informed of what's going on around them. But I think one of the problems that we have is this fracturization within the news, driven largely um, by a profit motive, right? Where people can choose the news that they want to consume because they know that they're going to get the kind of story that they expect to get, right? So you got people who are of the conservative bent and they want to hear, pro Trump, pro whatever, pro conservative viewpoints, and not ever have those interrupted, even if it's by the facts, right? So they'll go watch Fox News, and you've got MSNBC people who are very liberal and want to hear liberal viewpoints, and they want to hear stories that tear down um, the details around impeachment or whatever those things are, right? And I'm not saying I'm one way or the other, but I think there is a problem in that we as a society now have the ability to custom design our feeds to ensure that we are only surrounded by the types of people that agree with us and the types of news that we wish to consume that confirm that basically feed right into our confirmation bias.
I,
And
this is it's a lot to really take in, and like even people listening to it I think aren't not like, even for me, like I'm still hearing you, but it's like it never really sinks in because like the comfortability with our devices. I mean, I only know that like it's so easy just to be able to go on Safari on my phone and order something to my house rather than go to the store and get it. But then I even find myself at times like, I mean, I'm on my phone at 2 o'clock in the morning just doing nothing sometimes, and I'm like, shit, like when I started doing that and realizing that was impeding on my sleep and impeding on so many
yeah,
things in my lives, like eventually it all adds up. I mean, I have a fear for technology in a way, mostly the way people are choosing to take it. Seems like we're becoming a little bit more lazy, even though it has increased a lot of easily accessible things now to our lives, such as information being at your fingertips.
sure.
It is a little bit like it seems like every problem that people face in technology fixes technology created in the first place.
Well, and the type of technology you're talking about largely is designed to be addictive. I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean like figuratively addictive, like sex addiction or some of the other addictions that.
Dude, Dragon City, man. I
Yeah.
swear to God, every time I get a paycheck, $20 goes to Dragon City on the basis of gems. I don't know what the fuck they do, but they make the game hell of a lot more fun.
Yeah, I've spent. I tend to get on mobile games every now and again, and then I play them a lot for a couple of weeks, and then I get bored with them and chuck them. But I've made a rule where I don't spend any money at all on mobile games. But it's funny because you're talking about people like that just are absorbed by their devices, and one of the things that I do now and have done for 24 years is that I work for a haunted house. I've been doing that for a very long time. In fact, we just wrapped up our season. So hold on one second. I'm sorry.
And you hear that creepy door was an amazing sound effect for the haunted house scene.
Yeah, it's my son, my 4-year-old. Yeah, so I've worked there for 24 years and I've seen a lot, of changes over that time. But it's amazing to me. People come to an environment where things are supposed to be terrifying, right? There's monsters roaming around and they're in line, but I'm walking around within 10, 15 feet with a chainsaw. I'm a pretty big guy and pretty scary. And,
You don't look this.
they
You look
just,
like a teddy bear to me, man.
I could show you pictures, but they, they're on their phones. They're like looking down into their phones, or they're maybe taking selfies occasionally, but mostly they're looking down into their phones. And granted, they're waiting in line, but there's a lot of entertainment value going on around them, and they're staying there with their friends, and they're completely absorbed. And so I constantly will I'll sneak up on people and scare the crap out of them. And I say like, hey, like there's like real life going on all around you right now.
This scared
And
me one time because, like, actually, this is definitely a topic I wanted to talk about with you because haunted houses are like a lot of people like the disconnect. Like, it's like for a teacher that is trying to teach a class of children that gets impeded by a cell phone. A haunted house gets impeded, the horror effect to it. You're paying to go to a haunted house. You're going to want to experience fear. You can't experience fear if you're too busy wondering what someone posted on Instagram and making sure your Instagram post is getting enough likes. This is a problem I face at the movies sometimes too, which is why I really don't go anymore, because the concept of now in the beginning of the trailer, instead of shut off your cell phone, where that was just becoming a thing because nobody had a cell phone going to the movie theater, people weren't recording and doing all that stuff. Now it's please dim your brightness or please put your phone on vibrate. I'm like, what? No, tell the motherfucker, get off his phone. Like, I don't want to see your face screen and all that stuff light up. You taking selfies. Oh, watching Avengers in the movie theater. I'm like, that's wonderful. Good for you. I'm glad that you're
It's
socially.
tragic, but
And it's crazy because haunted houses are kind of one of like the little scares in life that are still technically original. And I really like the concept and creativity behind it.
well, thank you. I mean, we work really hard on them. Like I said, I've been in the industry now for 24 years, so longer than you've been alive. And it's given me a whole lot in my life. Like I've met my wife there. It's my family, it's my family away from my family, and I have a great family. So, blood family. So we put a lot of work into it and stuff, and it's fun. But it is one of those places where you do notice like how jaded we've become as a society where, people are, paying $50 in some cases to go through a haunted house, and they're spending the whole time looking at their phone, which they could have done sitting on their couch.
Do
Or
you think that takes more impact out of the scare, especially like you jump out of a corner and the person didn't see you because they're staring at their phone?
well, in the house, when you're going through the house, they're banned.
Oh, that's
But
a
you
good
don't,
concept.
yeah, but it doesn't matter because, the house is dark and it's intended to be disorienting. So people almost always inevitably pull out their phones and turn on their flashlights. And one of the reasons that we ban them in the house, right, is that one of the things that we do if you have a kid that's coming through that's too scared is we'll stick one of our security people or one of our other volunteers with them with a flashlight. And that flashlight is a warning to the actors that are coming up, like, hey, this person shouldn't be scared because they're a little overloaded or what have you. And so if a person's coming through with their flashlight out, if my eyes are adjusted to the dark, I can't tell if it's, some customer with a phone or my actual security guard. So you come through with your phone out and your flashlight on, you're not getting scared. So you basically just wasted your money.
I
Like
had
literally
one.
you're walking through dark hallways.
I had one of the worst experiences. There's this baseball stadium that they use for like a haunted kind of hallway. You get to walk through the whole stadium, not like the inside of it, but like the hallways and all where the shops and usually are on the side, bleachers and all that. And they disguise it up pretty good so you don't see. And I was a little kid with my dad, and I was already scared as crap to go in there. I did not want to at all. Well, the guy had a chain and he was hitting it, but it was in the dark. So what
Mm-hmm.
actually happened was he went to hit beside, I guess, or in between me and my dad. And I was very little at the time, probably like, I know how to walk, but after a while I was like, fucking carry me already. And,
Yeah.
we're holding hands, kind of going through the things just so I don't kind of get lost. And the dude went to go through the chain, and he actually, instead of hitting in between us, he actually hit me,
Yeah.
and it was actual chain. And it really, really, actually, I do remember it hurt a lot. I did cry. Shut up, everybody out there. It hurt.
Hey, look, you know what? There's no shame in tears, man.
So we ended up sitting out on the street, and I remember the guy actually ended up getting arrested because there was a bunch of kids that were out there skateboarding and actually messing with him. And he actually was taking the chain and hitting them. And he actually missed and did not realize there was an undercover cop, and he hit the cop car. And yeah, it became a big scenario. And that's what always kind of questioned me about going into haunted houses, because you got to kind of understand that someone might actually be crazy. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that's for your specific case, but that always popped into the back of my head, kind of kept me out of it a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, any good haunted house has been open for several years. They're going to have, like for example, part of what my job is at that haunted house, because I've been there so long, is that I'm an actor liaison, and in that role, my job is quality control. So I manage my actor team. I make sure that they're coached and they know how to behave and they know what's safe and what's not safe. Believe it or not, the actors in the haunted house are much more danger than the customers typically. We go into the areas that are not as safe for you guys. Like, a haunted house is a walkthrough, and it's got all kinds of, and a good one, it's got all kinds of safety measures, paint on steps and lighted areas where customers know they can step safely if they're going up or downstairs. I can't touch you. That's like against, like rule number 1, etc. In a bad haunted house, that may not be true, but in a good one, your customer's almost always safe. It's going to be very hard to get lost. You're going to have to do something on purpose to try and get hurt, essentially, unless there's, an accident, which happens. But customers punch, kick, fight, shove, whatever, actors all the time. and we're going into the areas of the house. We're going into dark closets and corners to hide that are not well lit. There's, boards and things. And I mean, I've seen plenty of people get real hurt doing haunt acting over the years, and not through negligence, just getting punched. I mean, last night of the year, I almost got into a real fight for the first time in probably over a decade. Like I said, I'm a pretty big guy, and I have a chainsaw when I'm acting, and I'm wearing all kinds of kind of
Yeah,
gear.
who had the balls to fight you with the chainsaw?
Well, he was a big person.
Are we talking Hulk Hogan?
I mean, he was probably 6'6" or 6'7", big beard like mine, redheaded guy. And it turned out he was a family member of one of my other volunteers, which is unfortunate. But he just kind of lost his mind and wanted to go backwards to the haunted house to find his wife. And we're trying to stop him because that's dangerous. You're not allowed to go back into the haunted house backwards. And, you're not going to find anybody in there. If we can't find them, you can't. We've never lost anybody in 31 years. So I'm getting in front of him and telling him, you need to calm down and you need to turn around and go back. Your family member will be out in a minute. And he just starts telling me he's going to send me to the hospital, all kinds of stuff. But, it was a sad, unfortunate situation because he wasn't going to win that that encounter. It wasn't just, it wasn't going to be him fighting me. It was going to be him fighting me, which was not a for sure thing how that would turn out. But then he also would have had my 2 other chainsaw guys on him. And then he would have had all my security guys on him. And then eventually he'd have had the cops on him. So you're not going to win this. So you might as well just calm down.
This is when I give you guys a lot of credit for what you guys do, because a lot of people don't understand. Like, first of all, it is a fun aspect for you guys. Obviously, instilling a little bit of scare to people. That is a fun reaction. That's why horror movies are so much fun. It's funny to see somebody get scared or, hear a scream, not anything life threatening, but it does get dangerous when it comes to how people choose to react. I mean, you're dealing with the public, and the public is probably one of the most difficult, at least anything that deals with the public job wise is probably one of the most difficult things to do,
Sure.
on the basis that people tend to be a little bit random when it comes to how they're going to either act, especially over something so sensitive as being scared. There's a fight or flight response between all of that. That's why I always kind of wanted to stay out of it. Yeah, it would be fun to scare the occasional person every now and again, but I honestly know that the one time you do scare somebody, who's to say, like, you've seen all the fight videos of people that are just jumping out of trash cans, get punched in the face. It's sometimes it's a reaction for a person just to do that. One of the most horrific incidences I think I've ever seen was we paid $60 to go to this haunted maze type thing out in Delaware. It was a giant open cornfield. So they just built up all these little buildings. It was a bunch of like 8 different trials you had to go through. Each one lasted like 30 minutes. So you were there for like 3.5 hours basically. And it was really, really good, really, really well done. I was like 17 at the time, so I was like, I don't really get scared. Mostly, that's not credit to me. It's just like, you could jump out. I'm like, oh, whatever, but it only goes that far. And I watched a couple, a guy, he was wearing a tank top. It was fucking November, I'm pretty sure, and it was like, really, like, we're at the start of November and you're wearing a tank top. It's cold as shit. I can see that you're pale white right now because you're so cold, but you're trying to act all macho. Well, there was a steps you had to go down, and someone was under the steps. So they stuck their hand out and grabbed him by the ankle. And he screamed, and immediately with his boots started stomping on the person's hand. And I mean bad. And I saw it happen where I actually said something, and I actually went and asked the person if they were all right. And I ended up having to call one of the other actors over to help this person. And it was difficult to watch, but it really put in the perspective in my mind of what you guys have to deal with on a daily basis, whether you never know how someone's going to react.
Sure. Well, in that case, that would not have happened at my haunt because we don't scare on stairs just because we don't want anybody to ever stumble or fall, that sort of thing. But I mean, that can be a very effective scare. And we do have plenty of other areas that we do act in that could be dangerous to somebody if they reacted poorly. We have spinning tunnels and all kinds of things. Ultimately, what you want people to come through and have the perspective of wanting to have fun. If you'll let go of, like, I tell people all the time, like, people come through 14, 15-year-old boys and they want to bow up to you if you try to scare their girlfriend, or they want to act like they're really tough. And I have a couple of pat responses I always throw at them when that happens. And one of them is essentially that I just tell them like, look, if you want to prove you're tough, you don't go to a haunted house where you know nobody's going to hurt you. You go to Afghanistan or Iraq if you want to prove you're tough, right? Like you, doesn't prove anything to anybody really, right? But also, a lot of times you can just, I just turn off the chainsaw and like stare them straight in the eye and tell them like, look, I've had scrambled eggs tougher than you. And you're welcome to come,
Damn,
come try it on if you want.
That's a freaking pop. That immediately made me think of Popeye for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, and honestly, like I'm wearing a whole bunch of gear and makeup and a helmet, and I've got titanium gloves and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, I'm not, in that place, it's an act, right? But you play up the idea that you're really dangerous and really scary.
Yeah, you
and I think that's, do what?
You got to play the part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you can't back down from it either. Like you don't want to remove the magic for anybody because it's just like, Disneyland where you're going through for characters. And I think that haunted houses and horror movies have a very important role to play in our society at this point because we do, as a society, we've kind of eliminated most of the really dangerous, scary stuff, right, that we deal with. I mean, like if you look at violent crime is down, industrial accidents are down. Like there's not a whole lot of people doing construction jobs that are as dangerous. A lot of the most dangerous jobs have been, moved to, automation or, coal mine, they're not coal miners down digging coals. That does happen still to some degree, but most of the time now they're just blowing off the top of the mountain and, taking all the coal out and then building the mountaintop back up. And I'm not saying that we should be in a world where everything is dangerous or that any of those changes aren't excellent changes, right? But I do think that the human mind needs like to be afraid occasionally.
You need to feel mortal. That's the problem. A lot of people
Yeah.
feel immortal because on their everyday life they're seeing things like, and they're doing so much and the way technology is going. My one buddy thinks that eventually one day he's going to be able to implement any type of technology where he's just going to live forever. And I'm like, look, man, if it comes to replacing everything, even your dick, I don't want to live in that world anymore because that's a little bit too far. Technology is advancing in a very fast way, but a lot of people mostly have the mentality of a 17-year-old or 18-year-old kid where they think anything can stop them. They're invincible. They can go through anything. Let me tell you, I got leveled at a young age that I was not invincible. I was 17 years old, fresh out of high school. This summer, I got hit by a jet ski. Okay. It almost killed me. And I realized, I was fine without it. Like they were going to give me Valium and all this stuff. And I ended up just taking a leave to get over it. I was taking like 20 of them suckers because that was the only thing helping with the pain because my back was pretty messed up. And, at that point I realized like this really hurts. I was able to recover quick. I mean, I was back on the job like 2 days later. I was just laying on my jet ski, like, all right, guys, get in this position. Like I was still hurt. I should have been gone for probably the whole summer, but I by the end of the summer, I didn't feel it anymore.
Well, the joys of 17, I guess.
Exactly. That's the mentality that people are keeping in their heads, even as they get older into adults. And I'm like, look, that's not going to happen. You see the 40 or 50-year-old guy that tries to fight a younger kid at the bar because the kid might think he's all tough. And the older guy's like, oh, I'm not going to back down to some kid. It's like, hang on a second. Just keep in mind that we're technically all giant bags of blood right now. And that when you cut yourself, that bag gets open and blood comes out. What's to stop person from breaking your skull, doing these incidences that I try and always keep in my head to make sure I never overreact in a certain situation. You see it at the bar. Someone gets drunk, they lose the dehumanization of how tough they really are to who they can take on. They end up throwing a jab at a bouncer or doing something and end up getting severely hurt. And it's all in the concept of we're all people and we are fragile. We're not invincible. And I think that scare, that factor that makes like just keeping that in your head that we're not invincible is a very important thing in our society's roles, at least, because it shows how far you can act or how you should be acting.
Well, sure. And I think also there's some real value to you spend an hour walking through a haunted house, and over the course of that hour, you really feel, and it's simulated, right? But you feel terror in many cases. A lot of these people come through are really genuinely afraid.
But no immediate
really scared.
danger. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but they're not in any danger. And when they walk out at the end, they just feel like this amazing wash of relief, right? Like they came through it okay and they're fine now. And they got this huge endorphin rush from their brain being tricked into thinking that they were in that fight or flight, scenario. And I think that those kinds of stresses are actually a really good thing for the human brain. I mean, if you ever get a chance, there's this really cool, you can watch a YouTube video about it, experiment called Universe 23, which was done on mice and rats. And there's not a huge analog to mice and rats, although I think that, all mammals kind of share a pretty similar brain architecture largely. So they did this thing where they built this universe, and they ended up doing it 23 times to get the perfect universe for rats, where they had like perfect housing, perfect food, all this stuff. And they ran the experiment a number of times, but essentially every single time what they found was that when there was absolutely no sickness and no predation and no problems, no scarcity of resources, that these rats would rise as a society. They would populate the whole thing, and then they would decay and essentially completely collapse, and everyone would die off.
Well,
And they noticed,
that's a perfect representation for humans in a way, because I know when they introduced like a species of animal that don't belong in a certain area, they did it with wolves to decrease the deer population, because the deer population was getting so high because
sure.
it had no natural predators in the area. It was taken away through human, I guess, interaction with the habitat. So we introduced wolves. Next thing you know, we have an overpopulation of wolves.
Sure. Look at like the cane toad in Australia, which is like decimating their local environment because they were introduced to take care of a particular type of grub.
That's why rabbits are banned in Australia in
Yeah.
certain cities, because some 1845 whatever jackass English settler came over and brought 12 or something like 50 rabbits over, and they just kept populating everywhere.
Yeah.
Now they have a rabbit control problem where they're not even supposed to be there.
Yeah. I've seen videos where they're literally taking 2x4s to try and wipe them out, and they're like whacking. These are old, they're black and white videos. They're like whacking the ground and hitting 8 of them because there's that many of them. They're just like locusts.
It's like rats in New York City. Like there's now 2 different species of rats. There's what they call the sewer rat, and then there's the street rat, which a street rat's like probably the length of your laptop screen. And then sewer rat's like the size of like, I don't even want to know. It's a lot bigger than they have them
Well,
just
yeah,
hanging.
those were all Norway rats originally, right? So it's interesting to watch that speciation event occur and have, you have 2 distinct species populations from what is essentially originally a single population. That sort of thing is fascinating to me. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard that about that, but I'll have to look into that a little more because I do find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, there's videos in people of New York on the subway. Like I know there's one where there was a rat that ran up to a dude's foot. The dude just picked it up like it was nothing. Just picked it
Yeah.
up. I mean, straight up. I mean, even whether he's the type of kid that will always play with bugs or something and had that kind of like natural non-fear of animals in that way. Still, there's contamination there, but they have them hanging from the subway sometimes too. People just have rats hanging because apparently rats are, like you were saying, like the brain structure a little bit like us in a way with building up society and having it crumble. They are really, really aware of a situation, such as when you put a mouse trap with cheese. If a mouse or a rat gets killed by that trap, the other ones, like the older ones, like with a poison trap, they'll let the younger ones go first to test it. The ones that are not, they're very, very quick learners, I would say. And
Yeah.
what they do in New York is they hang rats in certain areas, and the other rats know to stay away.
That's interesting. We ended up living in a house one time by a construction zone. And so while they were doing the construction, it was flushing all the rats out of like some local wood areas. And so we ended up living in a house that got kind of infested with rats for a minute. And so I went and bought an air rifle because that's what I do in these situations.
Hey, that's
And
logical to me.
yeah. Well, I mean, we had traps and things too, but like I remember the reason I did that was because at one point we were trapping, and I didn't feel good about glue traps or whatever because I had to put them so many different places, and I don't like the idea of an animal like starving to death somewhere, right? I mean that's not. I mean I don't want to be cruel to them. I just want to have them not be a problem anymore. So we were dealing with it, and I remember one morning at like 2 a.m. or something, we got hungry, and I got up and went into the kitchen to get some cereal, and one of them, like this huge rat, was just like on the counter, and like he was not bothered, like he just wandered away. He kind of plopped down off the counter and then walked across the kitchen in front of me, kind of like having a roommate, and he was just kind of like, "Oh, I'm sorry, dude, I'll get out of your way." And I was like, "Okay, these things are not scared of us at all, and they're huge, and we've got to do something about this." So I went and bought an air rifle.
Dude, they're actually very smart, because I remember at one point, I think I was like 16, I was setting up mouse traps in my house, and one of them died the first time. Took the cheese off the mouse trap, and that happened. Then I started realizing I set up more because there was obviously more of them in the house than just one. There usually always is multiple.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I came downstairs. The bait that I put on the mousetrap was actually gone, but the mousetrap had not gone off. And I was like,
Hmm.
how the hell is this happening? And I was like, wait a minute. So this was around the time I kind of realized that like they have like this group kind of like, like watch and then react. And then what happens, like they learn from that. Like, so if someone gets poisoned and they realize that's poison, they won't go near it anymore because they think it's poison.
Sure.
So I decided like, okay, let me buy more mouse traps and keep setting it up. All of the bait was gone. And I was like, what the hell? So keep in mind, I am 16 years old, 17. And so I went and I was like, maybe it's the trap. Maybe it just didn't go off. Maybe I got bunk traps. But I was like, there's 10 of them. There's no way all 10 of them are bunk traps. So I went over. At first, I tried like a stick and I would snap a couple to make sure I didn't get my finger. Well, first time I did use my finger like an idiot. And then that fucking hurt. But like I was poking the traps, watching them all go off. Like, all right, it's not the traps. Maybe it's the sensitivity factor. The mice are a little bit like quick on their feet or something where they can just easily knock it off or something. So I adjusted the traps, set it to like a very like hairpin trigger. So if something even like the wind could hit it, it's gonna snap. So I was like, that'll get them for sure. No, dude, they advanced so much smarter than the mouse trap, the basic one, that I had to go and buy a whole nother mouse trap to evolve. And I'm like, when I walked in there, I was like, no, the basic one will do. The guy's like, yep, okay. And then he saw me again later and later, and I kept getting a bigger and bigger trap. And I was like, hold on a second. So why do I keep buying more of these? And he goes, because they're smart. You don't think it because they're so tiny, but they're actually very smart and they learn. They learn. And
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, that first night I set up and I took three within an hour, and then the second night when I shot the first one, they went away for an hour before another one appeared. And then the third night, it's like you could, after the third night, you could only shoot one. Like it didn't matter when you set up. If you waited till 4 a.m. or whatever, the first time they heard the gun go off, they were gone and they wouldn't come back for the rest of the night.
that really
So,
puts in perspective, like just like we look at them like they're nothing. We look at them like they're just disgusting little creatures. Like not like it's nothing out of our day. We can easily kick it, stomp on it, whatever, finish it off. But they're so smart. We should actually probably be a little bit more aware of them.
well, I mean, they're just as evolved as we are, right? They're evolved to survive the way that they survive. Um, so like this idea of, how advanced they are, they're perfectly suited to the survival technique that they found their niche in, right? And if we change it too much, they start to die off. But the ones that survive will be better suited to deal with our whatever we come up with next. There's
Hey,
actually a guy that does these videos called Mousetrap Mondays, where all he does is test different rat traps. He has a barn in like Canada or something, and so he like literally just does every week. He tests different rat traps in different styles, everything from electric stuff to water traps to all kinds of stuff. It's crazy.
seems like a guy that has a mousetrap Monday probably works out of a barn. Seems pretty
Well,
loud.
I think he's like a farm, but it's interesting. He's actually a really interesting guy. He produces a lot of content. He even has an app, which I don't have an app myself. So he's one up on me, I guess.
Well, when I think it's interesting because, like, I do want to bring up one more thing that you did when we first messaged originally. You said you're a cigar aficionado.
Yeah, yeah. I do enjoy cigars. I don't do them as much these days as I used to do, um, because I have my 4-year-old. Um,
Yeah, he's saying hi in the
so
background. I see.
yeah. So, but yeah, when my wife was pregnant with him, she would spend a lot of her time sleeping, and I lived in an apartment literally across the street from a cigar bar that here in Fort Worth, Texas, where I live, called Paladins. And so I'd come home and she'd be sleeping all the time or sick to her stomach. And so I'd feed her and then get her down to sleep. And I'd just go hang out over there because she would be sleeping all night. I didn't want to disturb her with anything. So I take it. I saw from your picture, you're into cigars as well.
Dude, that's the first cigar I've ever had, man. I literally was like, I'm gonna do graduation cigars, and it's been like it was supposed to be for college, and because when I got my associate's degree, I was like, oh, that'd be cool to do that with like
Well,
my buddy.
congratulations.
And so I actually went into a cigar shop, and this is the question, like where it just fascinated me. It opened up my mind to a whole new place. Like I saw cigar lounges. I'm like, all right, who really chills at one of these places? When I walked into a cigar shop, I was a kid like a child basically with no knowledge on anything, like born fresh off the earth, on the concept of I walked in there and there were so many varieties. There were the long, big ones looking like, you know, like one of the members of the Sopranos or something. And
Sure.
then there were so many different flavors and all these things. And I'm used to like maybe a Swisher at a Food Line, like the off, like $1 cheap stuff. And there was stuff ranging up to like, this is rolled with banana leaf. And I was like, what the fuck? What world am I in right now? And the woman's like, what are you looking for? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, what's your price budget? And I was like, well, my price budget, first of all, would be, I don't know, like $20, $30. I don't see the right thing here to be doing maybe $100 cigar if it's like my first time. Just give me something that
Jesus, man. What kind of sticks are you looking at, man?
that's
Jesus.
what I'm saying. I'm like, oh, look, just give me something I can smoke that is like nice and it doesn't break the bank. And she was like,
Sure.
okay, well, let's get out of this section. So she steers me like a little kid in the toy store and goes, let's go to these little guys over here. These are going to be the ones in your price range that have flavor to them. So I picked like a mint, but like, is the concept really so diverse with cigars that people really go and spend thousands of dollars on these things?
Man, there's people that have like home walk-in humidors. There's a lot of there's something for almost every taste. The thing that's interesting about cigars is that cigars are more of an experience. You talk about like things like we were talking about being in your phone all the time, right? Like when you sit down to smoke a cigar, you've spent a decent amount of money on it. I mean, I typically spend no more than $10 or $15 on a stick myself when I'm smoking a cigar. And when you do that, you're saying like it's a 45-minute commitment to an hour to smoke a cigar, right? And so you're not going to just do that offhand while you're doing something else. You're going to sit down, you're going to have a nice glass of bourbon, you're going to smoke a cigar, and you're going to be present in that moment. It's almost like meditation in a way.
Yeah, it's not like a cigarette. It's not something you puff down real quick. I think that's probably I ruined my experience of buying that cigar when me and my buddy my cousin, we were just literally parked watching a sunset. And that was it. Like we were rushing really. We kind of just smoked through it real quick. And then like 20 minutes later we were done and just like over it. And they were big ones.
Yeah.
And they were like, reasonable ones to get, but it was like something like, oh, I might as well experience it. And he was like, don't inhale. I'm like, I've been doing that the whole fucking time. Like
Yeah, it
nobody.
can mess you up, man. So you must smoke other stuff, like or not say other stuff, but like cigarettes or something. Because I don't smoke anything other than cigars. Never have, but I cannot. I mean, if I inhale something, I'm dying.
Well, he's trying to show me like, hey, it's a wood. You got a wood match light. You can't use a
Yeah.
lighter. And I'm sitting there like trying to light. I'm not good with a match. I just use a lighter, and I'm just sitting there like flicking it, and it keeps going out. It's not getting lit. I'm like, fuck it. I'm pulling out this cigar lighter, and I'm doing it this way. And
Well, yeah, that's kind of a purist thing. It's not necessarily true. There's people that talk about whether or not it matters. I personally think if you can get it set on fire, you're good.
do you think that like with a cigar, it's more on the basis of like aesthetic appeal? Because I know when it comes to like if you're a rich person, if you're wealthy, I know cigars were a sign of like wealthiness, at least back in history it was.
Yeah, like if you look at so for example, if you go read a book called The White City, which is an awesome book about it's The Devil in the White City. It's the name of the book by Larson. It's about the World Fair and all the planning that went into that. And it's also about America's first serial killer that we're aware of, which is his name was H.H. Holmes. But one of the things that they do in that is they run down the menus for everything during all these meetings that all the people had. And one of the guys was an architect. I can't think of his name at the moment, but he did basically the World Fairgrounds in Chicago, and he also did Fair Park or Central Park in New York. And literally one of the courses of the meal in like these 7-course meals was a cigar between like dinner and dessert. And that was on the menu, right? Like they served all these things and then they served out cigars. And there's always this idea of the smoky back room or whatever, where deals get made and political stuff. It has its own cachet for sure. But again, for me, I'm certainly not a wealthy person, but it is a thing where you can sit down and do this thing that's about relaxing and being in the moment and enjoying something out of the ordinary. If you don't like it, then it's not going to be a good thing for you, at all. But it's certainly not. I don't think it's ever something that you would want to rush. And
Well, I like what you said. It's like a form of meditation. Like it is a commitment to light a cigar, and I think a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh, it's gonna be badass, bro. We're rich, we're ballers." You know, that's the same status I was thinking of when I first tried it. And after talking to a couple people that do cigar podcasts and understanding their knowledge behind it, I was realizing that this is just like a form of relief, just like a cigarette is, but it's not so quick and it's not so damaging to you. When a
right, yeah.
cigar, yeah,
Studies recently have showed if you don't smoke more than 5 cigars a day, there's no difference in the impact to your health,
well,
which is interesting.
you're not inhaling it. That's the thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't enter your lungs. It's just really basically just, I don't even know what it would be called. A lot of people, like I said, it's a form of meditation. So I guess if you can get deep thought processes off of it, then it's beneficial. I think when it comes to a lot of things in this area of, you don't want to smoke, you don't want to do these types of things. I'm like, people are going to do what they want to do. I mean, we hurt ourselves every single day doing at least something. I mean, a lot of people give shit about vaping. A lot of people get all this, and you see cases and obviously in the news and things. But I always bring up the experience, like, back in the day, you guys had something that wasn't so popular too, like vaping, and it was dangerous to yourself that no one even really realizes. Hairspray. Sticky lung wasn't a legit thing that still happens today. People that dump thousands of bottles of hairspray into their hair trying to keep it upright in case a 50-mile-an-hour gale force wind comes through it, it's not fucking moving, and it's a concept of, we're living in a world where there's so many things, and I don't ever want to eliminate trying something once, because you never know what could be your thing. Not that it's not advocacy for cocaine or advocacy for whatever that's out there that people think, oh, well, I should just try it, see if I like it. No, it's a concept of, if cigar is your form of meditation, like a lot of people stigmatize them because they are disgusting or this. I'm like, but it's not for you then.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's why you talked about the lounge earlier, and that's a big part of why those lounges have become so popular. Is because, I mean, even in a lot of places where you go where everybody's smoking cigarettes, which to me are much more offensive to the nose and and to the body, because of the chemicals that they're treated with, et cetera. That's the thing about cigars, is that they're just natural tobacco leaves. Um, they don't have all the chemicals that give them a lower burning point than cigarettes do, which is why they're difficult to light. Right? Because it takes more effort to get them set on fire, because cigarettes are chemically treated to make them easier to burn and cooler smoke, so that you can inhale them deep into your lungs, and become much more addicted to them, et cetera. And the thing about it is, I think most, you talked about trying stuff. The most important thing that you have to do, right, is just try to enjoy your life. You're young, and you said earlier, you said something interesting to me, which was that you didn't think you'd want to live forever if you couldn't, right? And personally, this is the only life that I know for sure that I get. And I'm 40 years old, not 41 yet. I'm 40 years old. I have a 4-year-old child. I went through a real bad health scare a few years ago, and thought I was going to die, probably about the same time you were going through your experience. And, and definitely still going to die at some point. And I can tell you the difference in perspective. When I was a kid, talking about, not saying you're a kid, but when I was younger, talking about how, oh God, I'd never want to be 80 or whatever. Now I'm like, man, if I could live forever, oh, I'd be so happy to do that. I'd love to live forever. I know for sure I have this life, and I want it to last as long as possible. And I want to get as much enjoyment out of it as I possibly can.
When someone always brings up, because you hear talk about superpowers, if you could have one wish, what would it be? People are like, I want to be immortal. I want to live forever. I want to, like, that's what we try and do with supplements. We try and expand our life out. And I'm like, but for me, I would never want that, on the concept of just what I pulled out of a movie, The Last Witch Hunter with Vin Diesel, where he's sitting on the park bench with Elijah Wood, and they're talking about the world and how he's seen it all change, the city be built on top of bodies and all these types of things. And I'm like, yeah, it would be fun for like the first maybe 500 years, 600 years, but it gets old. And I think one of the most crucial but most beautiful things about life is that it does have an end to it, hopefully later rather than sooner. But I think that what makes this life kind of so inspiring and so really just worth willing to live is knowing that there is an end, and that you should be doing all that you possibly can do before that time has come, because you don't know if it could be now. You don't know if it could be 10 minutes from now. You don't know if it could be 100 years from now. It's always a concept of that. I watched my great grandfather, who lived to the age of 95, never, I mean, he had maybe some regrets, but never ever wanted to take back anything that happened in his life. And he was happy all the way until my great grandmother passed away. Then he died maybe a year or so later. And it was the concept of, he knew that one day he would be with her again. And if that's his belief that there was something out there, which I'm not saying there isn't, and I'm not saying there is, I'm just saying that the most beautiful, crucial, amazing thing about people and amazing thing about life is that it does come to an end. That just makes the ride a hell of a lot more enjoyable.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, in this case, right, like there would be no such thing as corporeal immortality. That's just not possible, right? We know that at some point there will be a heat death of the universe and everything will collapse back, most likely causing a second Big Bang at some point, or a third or a millionth, who knows?
Damn, did I just start talking to freaking Neil deGrasse Tyson? What's up?
No, no. Well, one of the things I mentioned when we talked earlier was that, a big thing for me is philosophy and anti-apologetics, which, I'm personally not a believer in anything, but because of that, I want to understand everything about the world that I possibly can to the best of my ability.
Same here, man. I got a lot to learn, and with all the time I have left on this earth, I'm going to do as much as I possibly can.
Well, you still have a long road ahead of you. So that's awesome, man. I mean,
I'm aiming for 26. That's really all I'm aiming for.
Oh, no, dude. 26, your life is still wide open.
I had this doctor that tried to get me into porn at one point, and I told him, I was like, not now.
What kind of doctor is that?
Yeah, exactly. It was because I have like body image issues. So this is why I work out all the time. I've told in the podcast, I've worked out every day for 7 years. It's no credit to me. It's a thing I have mentally that is a little bit of a addiction. But I was telling him, I was like, yeah, man, I feel like shit, don't look good and all this stuff. He's like, dude, I'm not going to say anything, but if you ever want to get into porn, I can help you out. And I said, hold on. Look,
everybody's got the internet. Everyone can help you get into porn. I can help you get into porn.
I say this. No, he's like, I got connections. I say this and nobody believes me, but only someone in my family that was with me at the doctor's when I went. And I have his images and like text messages that because he had my number and because he's a family doctor. So it was like, he had that stuff and he was like, hey, like, just to let you know, you're not as like, don't toll on yourself. He sent me all these texts. So I showed my buddy and he's like, holy shit, your doctor tried to get you into porn. I was like, right. I literally told him, not now, but if I don't do anything accomplishable at 26, I will be more than happy to. So I still got 5 more years left on me. So let's see where that goes. But all jokes aside, it's like I said, there's a lot of learning left to do, especially in my eyes. From when I first started podcasting to where I'm at now, I've learned so much and heard so much, and I don't ever want it to stop because I'm learning everything new every single day. I'm enriching myself with an amazing person, an amazing conversation. And like I said, I know our time's getting cut short here. I know you said you had to go. And
I'll say this. Let me just give you a bit of advice from a little further down the line, right? Which is that you just said if you haven't accomplished anything major in the next couple of years, accomplishments are a myth, man. Like if you think about it, like think about somebody 3,000 years ago, right? There were a lot of people that accomplished a whole lot with their lives. And from 3,000 years ago, you can think of the names of 1 or 2 of them. 1,000 years from now, or 3,000 years from now, or 5,000 years from now, their names too will be forgotten. Everything you ever do at some point will be forgotten. Even the greatest man who ever lived, he will be forgotten at some point in the future. So the only thing that you need to accomplish is try to find happiness and live in a life that's content and enjoyable, and try to reduce, suffering in the world around you as much as you can, and just try to make everything around you better. If you do that, then don't worry about whether or not you feel like you've accomplished something. Just try to, your life is just a garden that you have to tend, and your happiness, is the only thing that you need to try to grow there.
Damn,
and just
dude.
Focus on that.
You went from freaking Jason to Neil deGrasse Tyson to a fortune cookie maker in a matter of a minute. Like you just gave me a really good fortune. And honestly, that is amazing advice to live on. And we're definitely going to end on that. But at the same thing, I also want to throw in another accomplishment that I consider an accomplishment. I can die once there's a giant Diggum statue built. A gold Diggum statue, because that's what Adam West wanted and that's what I want.
Well, and then my advice is start a crowd fund or do something to make it happen. But
Patreon.
also,
Hit up that Patreon.
but if that's your goal, if that's the thing that you need to be your finish line for death, then maybe don't do that. Maybe wait a while. Maybe wait till you're like 90 and then you try to make that happen.
It's going to take me a while to get a lot of people to donate to build a giant Diggum statue.
I don't know, man. There's giant statues of all kinds of bizarre things.
I know if I could make statues, I'd be making some weird shit.
Well, you know when the best time to learn how to make statues is? About 10 years ago. You know what the second best time is? Tomorrow.
I like that.
Get started, mate.
So do you have anything you want to promote before we end here?
Well, I'm a movie buff. I'm a huge movie buff. And we have a podcast that we run called Night of the Moving Pictures Podcast. And we do a double feature of kind of unknown movies that are amazing. And we pair them with drinking games and recipes so that you can have food from the movies and enjoy drinks from the movies and have a blast with your friends. So you can find that anywhere. You can find this one, I'm sure. And you guys are welcome to listen to that. We'd love to have more ears on the pod. So, but I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. It's been amazing talking to you, dude. And I really appreciate you at least taking the time out of your day to be able to sit down and have a conversation with me.
Well, I appreciate you calling me. It was nice to meet somebody from Maryland. I've never done that before. So